Let's start at LSU. I'm going all over the place. I'm going to bounce wall to wall and give you as many takes as I can and as many takeaways from speaking to people around these programs as I can. It was a long night and a long morning on phones with a lot of people. Really good conversations, though. They are trying to go at LSU as 2019 as possible. As you have seen, if you're following LSU, as you have read, as you have heard, when you look at everything from offensive coordinator hire in Pate to defensive coordinator hire in Durante Jones, those are guys respectably, never get that word right, that have ties to obviously the proper elements that were around in 2019. Pete's obviously ties to Joe Brady. For those of you unfamiliar, that was the OC that's now with the Carolina Panthers. They did really good things at Baton Rouge in 2019. But also Durante Jones, he's got ties in his past to Dave Aranda. And so you start to see Ed Orgeron. It's not really, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand. Find out when you were at your best. Find as many of the elements that are related to what you were when you were at your best. Throw them all in the room, shake it up, and not by the spring game, but hopefully by the fall, we have a product that looks a lot more 2019 than 2020. We start at quarterback because I think by 10 miles yesterday, that was the biggest, I don't like you were storyline all that much, but that was the biggest storyline around LSU. Miles Brennan and Max Johnson, we never viewed this, we on this show at least, have never viewed this as a four-horse race. It's not. It never was. So we saw yesterday, those two have separated themselves. If you follow LSU, that's not breaking news. If you've really listened to Ed Orgeron talk, that's not really breaking news. There's no way that this is decided. It's decided, to me, it's a two-guy race, but it's not decided by any stretch that this is Miles Brennan's job. We're just going to kind of keep Max Johnson on the line as long as we can because we don't want him to transfer. That's what some programs are going to do with the quarterback battle. That's not what's happening here. By no means is this decided. Now, I will say this. Watching yesterday sort of reinforced my already held belief that I believe Max Johnson's in this. He's going to have to definitively take that job, whereas I think Miles Brennan will only have to be competitive or be comparable. And that's just my personal feel on that. I could be wrong on that. That's not information I've gotten from anyone. That's just personal feel. I'm not sure where their offensive line is. I don't think they know where their offensive line is. This is something you see a lot of times in spring games. There wasn't much of a running game yesterday. And that wasn't a mystery. That was something those defensive guys knew when they got off the bus yesterday morning. And so in a lot of cases, even if you are the most disciplined by nature defensive lineman, defensive end, edge rusher by nature, a lot of times when you get 15, 30, 45 snaps into a game and you realize all they're doing is throwing the ball, you get to pin your ears back and you get to go after the quarterback a little bit. And so you start to get some irregular results. So I'm not going to sound all the alarm bells around Louisiana over maybe some inadequacy that we saw along the LSU offensive line yesterday. However, I will say, even with that defensive front having a couple of defensive ends out, they got consistent pressure, especially the early portions of the game. They got pressure. So I don't know how much to take away from that. I'll say I think the offensive line situation is still kind of unsettled, not across the board, though. Like maybe the interior, maybe on the right side a little unsettled. Again, it's a good thing it's spring right now. So I think everyone looks at this twofold now. It used to just be, okay, we've got the offseason. Hopefully we can go through strength and conditioning. Hopefully a lot of guys really hone in the offseason and perfect their craft and blah, blah, blah. I mean, those aren't blahs. Those are legitimate. But now you also have another saving grace that's not going to save nearly as many of you as you think it is. But you also got the transfer portal out there, and so the transfer portal is going to be a cure-all for every single gap on every single roster. And in reality, you're going to find even the elite programs, most cases you're going to be stuck with what you're stuck with. And so that's why you pay coaches 6 and 7 figures a year, even at the positional level. You got to get it figured out. Kayshon Boutte is a surefire number one receiver in the SEC. He's an elite receiver nationally. He's going to compare favorably to anyone's number one receiver. Proven depth behind him is going to be an issue for them. However, unlike the situation at some other programs, LSU's wide receiver room is not void of talent. They've got a lot of names, if you follow recruiting, and we tend to do that around here. They've got a lot of names we remember talking about. In signing days past, they got some guys from this past signing day that are either on campus or coming on campus. They have to develop them. So proven depth is what I'm talking about. A lot of folks, I think, look at a chart and they just see a bunch of names that had a bunch of stars next to their name. They think that's depth. No, that's a bunch of names. Proven depth means guys that you can trust to put on the field at winning time and they can help win you football games. I don't know that they have a whole lot of those guys yesterday. Kirkland, wide receiver, had a really good day yesterday. That's the really good thing about sometimes when you're holding guys out of spring games. Saw this at a number of places yesterday. When some top line guys are held out, you start seeing names that maybe have not been plastered all over the place. They get a shot, and then all of a sudden they shine, and you look at the stat sheet and you say, he had how many catches for how many yards? Even though it's a spring game, draw your own conclusions. No, they got some talent down there. They just have to develop it. It's certainly not going to be the wide receiver room maybe from years past, last couple of years. Maybe not. We'll just see about that. But offensive line, wide receiver, there are valid questions there, I think, past the front line guys. But this whole game yesterday for LSU, it was a whole lot more of a theme over team type of deal. Everyone structures their spring games a little bit differently. But I didn't, nor did you, in all likelihood, tune into the LSU game and say, all right, we're about to learn everything we need to know about this team. When I say theme over team, I'm just trying to get a feel. When I'm looking at those quarterbacks, I'm not going stat sheet for stat sheet. I'm not going throw for throw because it's not an apples to apples comparison. But I'm just trying to get a feel. When I watch Miles Brennan, remember when we talked about going into this game, like which quarterback feels like more of a field general? Who looks like they step up in the pocket better? Who looks like they command the team better? Who looks like that? That kind of thing. I'm not saying anyone stood out over the other. I think Miles Brennan looked very good. I don't think he's all the way back from that abdomen injury. Talking to someone who was at that game yesterday, I think his best football is still ahead of him. And by best football this year, I think it's still ahead of him. So a lot to look forward to with LSU. I think they validated a lot of the belief that it's going to be hard with an overall talent roster that good to fail as spectacularly as many people think they will. My personal finer point on that as we move on here is I think it's going to be doubly hard with a quarterback room as good as theirs to fail as spectacularly as a lot of people expect them to. I said something on Twitter the other day. A lot of you got bent out of shape by it. I'm not sure why. To me, it's pretty commonsensical. I think LSU has got one of the best quarterback rooms in America. I wouldn't compare it to Oklahoma. I wouldn't compare it to Ohio State. I don't think they have a quarterback as good as Bryce Young from Alabama. Probably not a quarterback as good as JT Daniels. Understand that can be true. They can also have a better room than 95% of D1, of FBS, of Power 5. And so it's rare when you see that many solid options that none of them pan out. That's all I'm saying. So some mixed results from LSU as to be expected in the spring game.